The Enterprise is on what should be a routine mission, just checking in on a guy who's observing an alien species from among them. The only reason for concern being that they haven't heard a word from him for 6 months. Naturally, that's a bit troubling. And speaking of troubling, as they head in, a nuclear missile gets fired at them, something beyond the capability of both the planet that John Gill, the guy, is on, or the other inhabited planet in the system. They just got simple interplanetary rockets. The Ecosians, the planet that Gill's on, are far too primitive even for that, and Zeon, the other planet, are too peaceful to fire at the Enterprise with a nuke if they even had one. This merits investigating, but Kirk knows that if Gill lost contact, they might lose contact too, so he wants a subcutaneous transponder embedded in him and Spock so they can get beamed up if they lose contact.
If we fail to make contact at the appointed time, take our coordinates from the transponder and beam us aboard no matter what our condition may be.
Aye, sir. Whatever your condition.
You're going to get sloshed, aren't you? Ah, you lucky bastard. Well, mere seconds after getting beamed down, they find a guy being pursued by the authorities who yells to hide. Hide from...
Zeon pig.
If that fashion choice suggests Nazis, that's because they're Nazis. Spock reminds Kirk not to interfere, although usually there should be a Nazi exception.
How could this have happened? The chances of another planet developing a culture, like Nazi Germany using the forms, the symbols, the uniforms of 20th century Earth, are so fantastically slim.
Virtually impossible, Captain.
And yet, 2 episodes later, Gene Roddenberry would do that exact thing without the slightest thought of how to explain it. See my review earlier this week of Doctor Who on showrunners thinking that when it's them, they don't need to actually justify anything. They watch as announcements come through, the driving out of Zeons from the capital, the decoration of this lady. Militarily, I mean, they didn't put Nazi Christmas ornaments on her or anything.
Everywhere, preparations go forward toward the final decision.
Preparations A to G are already finished. We only anxiously await Preparation H, believing it will bring this final inflammation to a pleasant end. But the real shock is that the Fuhrer is none other than John Gill. So I'd say he really screwed up. Becoming Hitler does not happen to you by accident. You don't fall out a window onto a stormtrooper's clothesline and hit your upper lip on a shoe polish tin or something. Spock gets mistaken for a Zeon. Apparently anyone not clearly Ecosian is considered a Zeon, so they decide to do the old knock out the Nazi and steal his uniform trick. That's what Hitler's downfall was, Oh yeah, he made some blunders, but his insistence that all their uniforms be flexible enough for anyone to wear one, that's what really did them in. Spock does blunder by forgetting to do the Nazi salute when another officer comes by, and while they cover as well as they can, the Major isn't easily tricked. And now that they have his attention, he suspects that Spock is an alien, and when those pointy ears are revealed... Alright, I know, some of you are getting turned on. Not to worry, nobody passes judgment here. After a bit of flogging, the Major tries badgering with questions, I guess to make the beating not seem so bad by comparison. The chairman of the party interrupts, though. He's more thoughtful. And I trust the sentence, "He seems a very thoughtful Nazi," will never be taken out of context. He knows that Spock isn't a Zeon, and that the items found on them are beyond the ability of their scientists to understand. So this isn't a simple case of discovering some spies. He wants them tossed in cells for a while before being questioned again, over the Major's firm objection that he'd rather just kill them now and get it over with. Why kill later when I've got a perfectly good corkscrew right now, huh? The other prisoner is confused, though.
Why do the Nazis treat you as enemies?
Why do the Nazis hate Zeons?
Okay, so some of you say Zeons and some of you say Zeons. Well, this will be confusing. But then again, so is the idea that Gill could do this. He was the kindest and gentlest man Kirk had ever known. It's like finding out the Grand Wizard of the KKK was Mr. Rogers. It just doesn't parse. By the way, if a black guy can become president, I'd say the KKK has got the worst wizards ever. I'm sure Gandalf could have stopped an elf from becoming president if he wanted to.
We came here, we thought we were civilizing the Ecosians.
And they became Nazis. Nicely done. The Zeons left war behind a long time ago, so that if the Ecosians attacked, they'd be defenseless. And they may even allow themselves to be killed even if they could fight back. So repulsive is the idea of war to them. Well, that's a problem for later. Right now, they need to get out of this cell. So Kirk hits on the idea of removing the crystals from the transponder and fashioning a crude laser out of them.
As I recall from the history of physics, the ancient lasers...
A necessary step in any escape plan is a piggyback ride.
Let's all go to the lobby. Let's all go to the lobby. Let's all go to the lobby to get ourselves a treat.
Natural crystals.
Oh, Mr. Spark, the guard did a very professional job on my back. I'd appreciate it if you'd hurry.
Yes, of course, Captain. You realize that the aim will, of course, be very crude.
I don't care if you hit the broadside of a barn. Just hurry, please.
Captain, why should I aim at such a structure?
Let me get back to... You know, Captain, the role of the barn in Nazi history is an area historians have long overlooked. I believe going back... Well, eventually he cuts through the bolt, allowing them to escape. Once they've drawn in a guard and knocked him out. Spock has been spamming that nerve pinch today, really. I mean, it's going to get nerfed if he keeps this up. They spring the Zeon prisoner who promises to lead them to the lab to get their stuff, although the communicators have been taken apart and the phasers are missing. Giving Nazis phasers has got to violate some rule. I have to believe that there's a rule written down specifically to say Nazis don't get lasers. Well, with few options, Kirk agrees with Spock that they need to get out of here and worry about getting in touch with Gil later, and their Zeon friend brings them to the Resistance, led by their new friend's brother. But he has grave news. Poor guy's fiancée was shot down in the street.
She would have been my wife.
She lived for 5 hours while they walked past her and spat on her.
Thanks for breaking it to me gently. You're one of the good ones, brother.
Now you ask me to help strangers.
If we adopt the ways of the Nazis, we're as bad as the Nazis.
Zig Zion! Zig Zion! So Abrams, the guy in charge, agrees to let them stay.
May I work undisturbed somewhere?
Preferably while standing on the captain's back. Spock cobbles together a working communicator, he thinks, but the Enterprise is out of range right now. And to make things worse, the Nazis storm the place, led by that lady that was decorated earlier. Abrams is shot while Kirk and Spock can do nothing, but when she's distracted, Spock disarms her, and the whole thing nearly goes to hell quickly. Seems this was a test to see if they were Nazi spies. They didn't expect that their high-ranking mole might nearly be killed by mistake. Whoopsie! Yeah, Abrams is perfectly fine, and they believe now that Kirk and Spock aren't secret Gestapo agents, and if being flogged might seem like proof enough already, Daris here betrayed her own father to the party to secure herself within their ranks. So compared to that, a bit of BDSM play isn't so bad to gain cover for a spy. But not to worry, Daris only betrayed her dad because he told her to. He was on the way out because another high-ranking member of the party, Melican, started mistrusting him. Well, since we're sharing secrets, Kirk figures it's about time to start laying it out there for them. The Prime Directives become moot once one of your people has recreated the Third Reich. Though, would that make this the Fourth Reich then? Probably not important. Let's move on. Kirk says that this goes against not only what the Federation believes, but everything that Gil believes. They have to let him talk to the guy to figure out how he screwed this up so that they can unscrew it. If there was ever a time for Control-Z, it's now. So with Daris's help, she gets the others inside posing as filmmakers for propaganda purposes. I'm glad that's not me. I'd blow my cover right away. The first time someone does that salute of greeting, I'd think that they'd want a high five. She says that Gil won't be making an appearance. He's going to be in his booth for safety reasons and guarded by 2 men with machine guns, just in case. Isaac, the Zeon who's with them, suggests grabbing a machine gun and shooting through the door, but Kirk points out that would defeat the talk to Gil part of their plan. Besides, Spock is concerned about the way that Gil was acting through the window. It could be that he's dazed, drugged, or getting himself in the zone to announce a campaign of genocide. I mean, maybe you got to get in the right headspace for it or something. We don't know. Well, we need to figure this out, and Kirk has a plan.
Patch historical computer into uniform section. I want McCoy outfitted as a Gestapo doctor, Nazi Germany, old Earth date 1944. Make him a colonel.
Ha! I told you, he's 3 sheets to the wind, that cheeky bastard. You're not fooling us, Captain. Well, McCoy is quickly beamed down, but is having trouble getting into costume. Look at him struggle. You'd think he'd never dressed as a fascist before. The problem is that the signal to the Enterprise was detected and the building is being searched. And they found them, specifically the chairman of the party. Kirk plays off McCoy as being drunk, because a man ought to play to his strengths. But as Spock notes, there's no reason the chairman should have failed to recognize the alien prisoners who escaped unless he was deliberately pretending. That's one mystery. Another is why, when the Fuhrer gives his speech, it's all over the place, like someone cobbled it together from random pieces. Also, he looks drugged in McCoy's view. So they knock out the guards while Melicon takes over.
Hail, Fuhrer!
Hail the Fuhrer! Hail the Fuhrer!
The Fuhrer has given us our orders, and we pledge him our lives in this sacred task.
Well, let me tell you, Pilgrim, we're not sending a boy to do a man's job with them Zeons. Gil is drugged, so on Kirk's order, McCoy gives him a stimulant to ask him what the hell he's been doing down here. But the drugs are so powerful, even a stimulant's not enough. So Spock tries a mind meld, but time is running out. Melicon announces, on behalf of the Fuhrer, who is far too busy to handle all the little details, that the final solution is at hand, total extermination of the Zeons. So Darius asks Kirk to have the Enterprise destroy the invading ships, killing the thousands of soldiers to protect the millions who will die once they reach Zeon. While he mulls those grim numbers over, Spock gets Gil so that he can at least answer questions. But that's about all. Gil has been kept drugged for years by Melicon to serve as nothing more than a figurehead. So the answer to why go full Hitler is, the planet was in a desperate situation, and post-war Germany was in a desperate situation as well. I mean, not the same situation, granted, but the point was that the National Socialist Party got things together, turned a broken country into such an efficient engine it could soon be a threat to the rest of the world. Gil's hope was to try to have all the good of that with none of the bad. It's new light Nazi with half the fat. Well, things were going well, whipping the place into shape, but then Melicon had to go and spoil everything by turning their fascist society into something dirty. Well, before they can fix it, the chairman and some guards get in, but Kirk has a plan, telling Spock to take off his helmet.
For the second time in one day, Doris is a hero to the fatherland.
She captured a Zeon spy that was attempting to assassinate the Fuhrer.
Yeah, he's not bitter about all that time he wasted on his back, Spock, not at all. Of course, they're banking on the chairman actually being a sympathizer, so they get him to take Spock to Melicon to keep him distracted by talking about how inhuman Spock is. Could have just had McCoy do that for you and save time. Gil is pulled together enough so that he can publicly denounce Melicon and his agenda, calling him a traitor. Well, to prove how not a traitor he is, Melicon guns down his leader in front of everybody. That solves that little problem. He in turn is shot, after which the chairman insists enough is enough.
There's been enough killing. Now we'll start to live the way the Fuhrer meant us to live.
Let's not let this recent blemish forever tarnish the word Fuhrer, am I right?
I was wrong. The non-interference directive is the only way.
Well, there's a bit of wiggle room between prime directive and create a fascist state. I think we can all agree on that. Post-episode follow-up. Annoying character. I'm going to pass on this because annoying just seems a terrible adjective to apply to Nazis. It's like, you know what my pet peeves are? Authoritarianism and genocide. Just thinking about a state-sanctioned mass murder just irritates me to no end. So in lieu of that, we're going to give this episode the Springtime for Hitler Award for bringing in the Nazis. Final score for Patterns of Force is 6 out of 10, which is a testimony to it considering the laughable concept of its premise. The episode is one of the darker ones all around, not just for the content, but the closing sentiment where Kirk explains about how power corrupts and that a leader, no matter how well-intentioned, will attempt to play God. A rather sharp contrast to the idea of a good leader making things better, such as in Mirror Mirror. But what strengthens the episode is an effective tone, good byplay between Kirk and Spock, and an interesting commentary on how good people can embrace evil if it will make their lives better. John Gill's idea that Spock reiterates was the view at the time, that Nazism showed incredible efficiency and an ability to mobilize society. That view has been discredited, as it was really just piggybanking on a long-standing belief that the Germans were highly efficient people. Nazi leadership frequently undermined themselves in their power struggles, and that's the opposite of efficiency. The truth is far scarier, that two incredible ways to motivate people are to offer them hope and hate. If you offer hope on one side and a target for hatred on the other, then you can drive people to accomplish what they might not otherwise. That is why the symbols didn't matter. There was no reason for Gill to use the actual symbols of the Third Reich for his recreation, but he did because the shapes in and of themselves are benign. There is nothing in and of itself that is evil in the shape of a swastika. It's merely a collection of right angles. The evil is when the shape becomes a symbol, gains context. When it stands for something, that's when it begins. You feel something that is benign. In fact, the swastika has a positive history, but I'll leave that to the forums to discuss. But you fill that something with all that is wrong with you, and you turn it into an avatar for your own worst aspects. A shape, a word, an image. We corrupt it. We pour our worst qualities into it. It's people like Gill, who may have the best of intentions, who wind up in their desire to make things better to use those tactics, to believe that their noble ends justify whatever it takes to get there, no matter how many lives are destroyed and people harmed. The warning of patterns of force is that the pattern of using force leads us to a bad end, takes us as benign people and fills us with those worst qualities, corrupts us so that we feel hatred is justified if it will lead to the end we all hope will come. The same way that the evil of the Ecosians would have been evil no matter what symbols might have been on their uniforms, so too can the worst aspects that they, and the Nazis they represent, be found in us if we surrender to those same temptations.
All hail the Overlord! All hail the Overlord!
Note the sinister eyes and the malformed ears. Definitely an inferior race.